Something I see pretty regularly. Let's say, for example, a woman finishes physical therapy. She feels a lot better. She's motivated and wants to really keep that momentum going. So she does what completely makes sense. And she joins the gym. There's nothing wrong with that. There's wisdom in that to continue that progress. All of those things are great. But within a few weeks or a few months, sometimes less, something starts to flare up. And the knee that was just rehab starts now complaining on the leg press machine. Or the shoulder that was finally feeling better gets aggravated on a cable machine. Or nothing specific happens. She just gradually just feels worse than she did leaving PT, and she can't even figure out why. And so she starts to blame herself, and she thinks she maybe pushed too hard, or she thinks she did something wrong, did one of the exercises wrong, or whatever. And so it's usually not her fault. From my perspective, I think it's just more so a mismatch. A healing body walked into an environment that was really never designed for that body. If that makes sense. So I want to break this down. And so in that scenario, the environment, obviously it won. Peace, love, light, healing. I'm Nariah, founder of Iron City Biomechanics, and we bridge the gap between healthcare and fitness. And so this is week 2 of this month, we're talking about the continuum. That's injury, rehab, fitness, performance, and just longevity. And so last week, we talked about the gap that opens up right when a person leaves physical therapy. And so this week, we're going to speak about what happens when people try to fill that gap with a gym membership and why that often makes things worse instead of better. So if you walk into any commercial gym and look around, the equipment, the classes, the programs, the culture of the space, all of it was designed around one assumption: that the person that's using it, that's in that space, that person can already move reasonably well. And so gyms were built to take a functional body and make it more capable, more fit, more strong. The baseline is that you are healthy enough to train, and the goal is to do a lot more of that. And so that is a reasonable assumption. And for a lot of people, that is anyways. But it is the wrong assumption for someone who just came off of an injury, who's recovering. A healing body is not a healthy body that needs to work harder, to grind more, do all those things. It is a body in the middle of a process. And so movement patterns that have been disrupted, compensations that have been built into a new fascial network, because the nervous system is still guarding, is still bracing, is still working from the map that was drawn when the body was in pain. And so if you put that body in a gym environment, that's what we're talking, it's like taking somebody who has cardiac rehab and then putting them in a spin class. The spin class is not the problem. The timing of doing that is the issue. And so let me walk you through 3 specific ways that gyms create problems for healing bodies. Because I think once you understand this, in my perspective, that you'll never really look at gyms the same. So I'm trying to create and paint this picture for you from what I've seen just in my time doing this industry. So problem number 1 is that most gym equipment was designed to isolate specific muscles and allow the body to produce force in a controlled, predictable direction. That sounds helpful. For a healing body, it is often the opposite. And here's why. It needs to be the opposite. Because injury does not affect just one muscle in isolation. It disrupts the whole pattern. So the hip that was injured changes how the lower body loads. The shoulder that was hurt changes how the neck holds. The ankle sprain from 6 months ago changes how the knee absorbs impact. And so the body is connected. Fascia runs continuously throughout the whole structure to the next, communicating, organizing, distributing force across the whole system. So when one part of that system gets disrupted, the disruption travels through the entirety of the body. And so machines do not account for that. And so a leg press that loads the quads and glutes without asking whether the hip is stable enough to manage that load correctly, without checking whether the pattern being loaded is a healthy one or a compensated one, you can get a lot strong on a leg press machine and still make an underlining, and still have an underlining movement problems. And over time, those things become worse because the machine does not care how you are moving. It only cares that you move the weight in the first place. So problem number two, the classes. Oh my God, women folk in particular, no shade against them in their classes, but group fitness classes have a different issue. They are designed for the average participant, which means that they are designed for nobody in particular. And so the instructor has a room full of people at different levels, different bodies, different histories. The cues are general, the modifications are basic. The progression follows the class schedule, not the individual body. And so for someone with a healing body, specific restrictions, specific compensation, specific areas where load needs to be introduced carefully, a group class is essentially a guess. And so sometimes it can be a lucky guess. More often, something gets loaded in the wrong way from what I've seen. And so a compensation pattern gets reinforced instead of corrected. And nobody in the room saw it ever happen. Problem number three is the culture. Now, this one is harder to name, but it's just as real. You know, gym culture rewards effort. It rewards pushing through. The language of most fitness environments is the language of performance, which means, push more weight, more reps, burn more calories, faster, harder, and so for someone building towards performance, that culture it can be very motivating. And so, but for someone whose body is still healing, it's quietly dangerous for them. And so, and I'll say it's dangerous because, here's the thing. Most people who have been through injury already know how to push through. And that is not the skill that they necessarily need to develop. What they need is someone helping them understand what their body is actually saying. And a gym culture that says, push through is sending exactly the wrong message to a body that needs to be listened to, and most people are disconnected with their bodies anyways. And so I will share this because I like to be transparent. So, I'll share this about a woman that I worked with in the past. And, she had finished PT for, a knee issue, and she did everything right. She showed up for PT sessions. She followed a homework program that the PT gave her, and she was discharged with good results. And so she was proud of herself, and, she should have been, because not everybody is willing to do the work, especially when it's tedious or boring. And so she signed up for group fitness classes like 2 weeks after she was discharged because she wanted to keep moving, and she felt like that was a responsible thing to do. The third class, that knee that she had gotten PT for, now had an acute injury. Just that it was that familiar injury that she just had, now it was back, and she felt like she had all the work that she did was now undone. And so she came to me pretty discouraged, so when I watched her move and did her assessment, I saw what was going on. And so in the class, doing a lunge variation, her knee was caving inward. Every rep, the glute that should have been controlling that movement had not been rebuilt yet. And so it was not strong enough, and nobody in the class caught it because nobody in the class was watching her specifically. She was not doing something necessarily wrong. She was doing something that her body was just not ready to do yet. And those are different problems from very different solutions. Those are different problems with very different solutions, I should say. And so we went through the next several weeks doing something that the gym that she had come from was not set up to do. looking at her movement patterns specifically, rebuilding her neuromuscular connection between her glute and her knee, and working with the fascial restrictions that were still present from the injury phase when she was working with the PT. And so when she eventually went to one of our classes, she was set up to do a lunge more effectively. And so, the knee held up, the pattern was right, the body was ready. And so that is the difference between healing and training. And knowing which one your body needs right now, that matters more than most people realize. But again, like I said earlier, most people are disconnected from their body and what their body actually needs. And so I want to share the 4 things worth paying attention to help you gain some clarity. And number one, if something flares up within the first few weeks of returning to the gym, even when you are being careful, that is not bad luck. That is just the body telling you, hey, your movement patterns were not corrected before the load was reintroduced. Number two, if you feel better some days and significantly worse after others with no clear, explanation, then a healing body without an individualized guidance is guessing. And so some guesses can work, others load the body the wrong way. And so the inconsistency of the body, it starts to cause problems. And so it needs addressing. Number three, if you're modifying every exercise to avoid aggravating injury site, then the modifications need to, and you have to keep making modifications because of the constant workarounds. That's an issue. So if you got a workaround for every single thing, you have some movement imbalances. And so number 4, last one. So if you feel better after the gym, workout, but on your day-to-day, lifestyle, you feel you're tight here, you can't do things here, then you're building muscle the wrong way. You haven't fixed the movement patterns. And so here's what I want to leave you with. This is not a case against gyms. I want to be clear about that. But gyms are valuable. I do think gyms are valuable. Hell, I got 2 gym memberships. And so for the right person at the right time, though, I think that's when they can go into those environments. But a healing body is not ready to go into those environments. And the solution is not to avoid the gym forever. The solution is to build the foundation that makes the gym safe and productive before walking through those doors. And so, and having that sound movement patterns, fascial tissue that has genuinely been reorganized, and a nervous system that has updated the picture of what the body can actually handle. And that's how you move forward. And so this is what belongs between that rehab and fitness that I talk about. Not more PT, not a gym, but something specific in the space. This is something specific in that space. So injury, rehab, fitness, performance, and longevity. That is the continuum that matters because, again, the sequence that matters. And so if you skip ahead and skip a step and step into skip into more of the wrong environment, like I was saying, that can be problematic down the road. And so if returning to the gym after PT felt like starting over or made things worse instead of better, I want you to know that it's a pattern problem. There is a real explanation and a solution. And so you can schedule a movement diagnosis with one of our fitness practitioners at Iron City Biomechanics, and we will assess where your body actually is right now. The movement patterns, the fascial restrictions, the nervous system patterns. And we will see where you're at in terms of that injury phase, and we will build a specific path forward that prepares your body for the gym instead of sending it, in just unprepared. That's just being counterproductive, if you will. But again, I'm Nariah. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you whenever I'm looking at you.